that the Apache score over the next 10 or 15 days comes down considerably. And again, this could be a coincidence. But when we looked at the next patient, the same thing seemed to happen, you know. Came down in Apache score rather dramatically. I do think, that's my personal belief, that we are in for a major revolution in our treatment of our postoperative patients. And that this should mean that we learn to use enteral feeding again. I mean, 50 years ago, 30 years ago, this was the routine. But for unknown reason, enteral feeding disappeared some years ago. 100 years ago, no patient was on parenteral nutrition, and very few stayed in bed when they were sick. A professor in London with the name of John Hilton stood up in the middle of 1850s and said, in order for an organ to heal, it needs to rest. That led to an enormous activity of building hospitals around the world. And patients were put in beds everywhere, you know. They stayed for all sorts of diseases in beds. And we as surgeons saw all the side effects of that. Pneumonia, urinary infections, venous thrombosis, stagnant urine flow, intestinal paralysis. When I came into medicine as a young man, people were still in bed after coronary infarction or commotion, for example, for weeks. And it was not in the 40s and 50s, it was not unusual to stay in bed after a regular cholecystectomy for 3 weeks. And the medical personnel were fighting the complications we had produced ourselves. I learned as a young doctor that in order to be healthy, a patient should be up, walking around, and not staying in bed. Before I retire, I will also learn that it's not enough that he's up, walking around. He should also eat. The philosophy of Hilton, unfortunately, or fortunately, unfortunately for him, fortunately for us, was wrong. An organ has to be active to heal at the best. If that was true for bones, I'm not quite sure. My friend Anders Lindstrand is here. I'm a little bit afraid to make it general. But in the areas where I know and where I am an expert, those organs who heal the best are those organs kept active. This means that we should continue to ambulate our patients as early as we can. We all recognize that. We should also feed them. It's not necessary to give everything enterally. You can, a little is enough. I'm not here to say give up parenteral, but I'm here to say don't go 100% for parenteral. See what you can do. Usually the stomach is paralyzed after major operation, but not the small intestine or the large intestine. Can you get the food to the small intestine? Then it will be transported down and will work. If the patient is operated on as an emergency case, then you can milk down a tube to the small intestine or give a feeding urinostomy. If a patient is operated as an elective case, my suggestion is that to put a tube down into the small intestine the day before surgery and start to feed directly into the small intestine immediately after surgery. Well, this is today a big business, especially in America. They are 10 years before Europe. And in Europe, France, where I work now, is years before the rest of Europe. There are now new and fascinating delivery systems, tubes, new feeding formulas, and here are some of the tubes used to feed directly into the small intestine. Unfortunately, most of these are ineffective. It takes too long to get them down to the small intestine. It often needs the assistance of X-ray or endoscopy. So I dreamt one night that the tube should be constructed differently. Now, unfortunately, you might not see it. I produced a tube with a coil, you know, like a telephone wire. 5 coils. Hussein is lowering it, okay? Down. Other way. Here. Okay, fine. This is fine. This is made straight by a guide wire. It pushed down through the nose down into the stomach. The guide wire is taken out and the coil is developed. The patient is given, you know, a sandwich or something to eat. After 4 hours, you find that coil in the small intestine. It is recognized as food and immediately propulsed down into the small intestine, and from the next day it can be used for feeding. Furthermore, it stays there. It cannot be regurgitated up or into the lungs. Those on the market, and this is the reason why I developed this, has a poor performance. Everything has been tried, you know, with a heavy metal in the tip, tungsten or something else, with a balloon, with mercury, with water, with air. It has not functioned. In one series published, in a British series, the tubes were down in 30 to 40% after 24 hours. In another series published from Dallas, they were down in 57 to 68% after 3 days. We cannot wait that long. In